We started OpenAI 7 years ago because we felt like something really interesting was happening in AI, and we wanted to help steer it in a positive direction. It's honestly just really amazing to see how far this whole field has come since then. And it's really gratifying to hear from people like Raymond, who are using the technology we are building and others for so many wonderful things. We hear from people who are excited. We hear from people who are concerned. We hear from people who feel both those emotions at once. And honestly, that's how we feel. Above all, it feels like we're entering an historic period right now, where we as a world are going to define a technology that will be so important for our society going forward. And I believe that we can manage this for good. So today I want to show you the current state of that technology and some of the underlying design principles that we hold dear. So the first thing I'm going to show you is what it's like to build a tool for an AI rather than building it for a human. So we have a new DALL-E model which generates images, and we are exposing it as an app for ChatGPT to use on your behalf. And you can do things like ask, suggest a nice post-TED meal and draw a picture of it. Now, you get all of the sort of ideation and creative back and forth and taking care of the details for you that you get out of ChatGPT. And here we go. It's not just the idea for the meal, but very, very detailed spread. So let's see what we're going to get. But ChatGPT doesn't just generate images in this case. Sorry, it doesn't generate text. It also generates an image. And that is something that really expands the power of what it can do on your behalf in terms of carrying out your intent. And I'll point out, this is all a live demo. This is all generated by the AI as we speak, so I actually don't even know what we're going to see. This looks wonderful. Now I'm getting hungry just looking at it. Now, we've extended ChatGPT with other tools too. For example, memory. You can say, save this for later. And the interesting thing about these tools is they're very inspectable. So you get this little pop-up here that says, use the DALL-E app. And by the way, this is coming to all ChatGPT users over upcoming months. And you can look under the hood and see that what it actually did was write a prompt, just like a human could. And so you sort of have this ability to inspect how the machine is using these tools, which allows us to provide feedback to them. Now it's saved for later, and let me show you what it's like to use that information and to integrate with other applications too. You can say, now make a shopping list for the tasty thing I was suggesting earlier, and make it a little tricky for the AI, and tweet it out for all the TED viewers out there. So if you do make this wonderful, wonderful meal, I definitely want to know how it tastes. But you can see that ChatGPT is selecting all these different tools without me having to tell it explicitly which ones to use in any situation. And this, I think, shows a new way of thinking about the user interface. Like, we are so used to thinking of, well, we have these apps, we click between them, we copy paste between them, and usually it's a great experience within an app as long as you kind of know the menus and know all the options. Yes, I would like you to. Yes, please. Always good to be polite. And by having this unified language interface on top of tools, the AI is able to sort of take away all those details from you. So you don't have to be the one who spells out every single sort of little piece of what's supposed to happen. And as I said, this is a live demo, so sometimes the unexpected will happen to us. But let's take a look at the Instacart shopping list while we're at it. And you can see we sent a list of ingredients to Instacart. Here's everything you need. And the thing that's really interesting is that the traditional UI is still very valuable, right? If you look at this, you still can click through it and sort of modify the actual quantities. And that's something that I think shows that they're not going away, traditional UIs. It's just we have a new augmented way to build them. And now we have a tweet that's been drafted for our review, which is also a very important thing. We can click run, and there we are. We're the manager. We're able to inspect. We're able to change the work of the AI if we want to. And so after this talk, you will be able to access this yourself. And there we go. Cool. So, thank you, everyone. So we'll cut back to the slides. Now, the important thing about how we build this, it's not just about building these tools. It's about teaching the AI how to use them. Like, what do we even want it to do when we ask these very high-level questions? And to do this, we use an old idea. If you go back to Alan Turing's 1950 paper on the Turing test, he says, look, you'll never program an answer to this. Instead, you can learn it. You could build a machine like a human child and then teach it through feedback. Have a human teacher who provides rewards and punishments as it tries things out and does things that are either good or bad. And this is exactly how we train ChatGPT. It's a two-step process. First, we produce what Turing would have called a child machine through an unsupervised learning process. We just show it the whole world, the whole internet, and say, predict what comes next in text you've never seen before. And this process imbues it with all sorts of wonderful skills. For example, if you're shown a math problem, the only way to actually complete that math problem, say what comes next, that green 9 up there, is to actually solve the math problem. But we actually have to do a second step too, which is to teach the AI what to do with those skills. And for this, we provide feedback. We have the AI try out multiple things, give us multiple suggestions, and then a human rates them, says this one's better than that one. And this reinforces not just the specific thing that the AI said, but very importantly, the whole process that the AI used to produce that answer. And this allows it to generalize. It allows it to teach, to sort of infer your intent and apply it in scenarios that it hasn't seen before, that it hasn't received feedback. Now, sometimes the things we have to teach the AI are not what you'd expect. For example, when we first showed GPT-4 to Khan Academy, they said, wow, this is so great. We're going to be able to teach students wonderful things. Only one problem, it doesn't double-check students' math. If there's some bad math in there, it will happily pretend that 1 + 1 = 3 and run with it. So we had to collect some feedback data. Sal Khan himself was very kind and offered 20 hours of his own time to provide feedback to the machine alongside our team. And over the course of a couple months, we were able to teach the AI that, hey, you really should push back on humans in this specific kind of scenario. And we've actually made lots and lots of improvements to the models this way. And when you push that thumbs down in ChatGPT, that actually is kind of like sending up a bat signal to our team to say, here's an area of weakness where you should gather feedback. And so when you do that, that's one way that we really listen to our users and make sure we're building something that's more useful for everyone. Now, providing high-quality feedback is a hard thing. If you think about asking a kid to clean their room, if all you're doing is inspecting the floor, you don't know if you're just teaching them to stuff all the toys in the closet. This is a nice DALL-E-generated image, by the way. And the same sort of reasoning applies to AI. As we move to harder tasks, we will have to scale our ability to provide high-quality feedback. But for this, the AI itself is happy to help. It's happy to help us provide even better feedback and to scale our ability to supervise the machine as time goes on. And let me show you what I mean. For example, you can ask for GPT-4 a question like this of how much time passed between these two foundational logs on unsupervised learning and learning from human feedback, and the model says 2 months passed. But is it true? Like, these models are not 100% reliable, although they're getting better every time we provide some feedback. But we can actually use the AI to fact check it, and it can actually check its own work. You can say, fact check this for me. Now, in this case, I've actually given the AI a new tool. This one is a browsing tool where the model can issue search queries and click into web pages. And it actually writes out its whole chain of thought as it does it. It says, I'm just going to search for this, and it actually does the search. It then finds the publication date in those search results. It then is issuing another search query. It's going to click into the blog post. And all of this you could do, but it's a very tedious task. It's not a thing that humans really want to do. It's much more fun to be in the driver's seat, to be in this manager's position, where you can, if you want, triple check the work. And out come citations, so you can actually go and very easily verify any piece of this whole chain of reasoning. And it actually turns out 2 months was wrong, 2 months and 1 week. That was correct. we'll cut back to the slide. And so the thing that's so interesting to me about this whole process is that it's this many-step collaboration between a human and an AI, because a human using this fact-checking tool is doing it in order to produce data for another AI to become more useful to a human. And I think this really shows the shape of something that we should expect to be much more common in the future, where we have humans and machines kind of very carefully and delicately designed in how they fit into a problem and how we want to solve that problem. We make sure that the humans are providing the management, the oversight, the feedback, and that the machines are operating in a way that's inspectable and trustworthy. And together, we're able to actually even create even more trustworthy machines. And I think that over time, if we get this process right, we will be able to solve impossible problems. And to give you a sense of just how impossible I'm talking, I think we're going to be able to rethink almost every aspect of how we interact with computers. For example, think about spreadsheets. They've been around in some form since, we'll say 40 years ago with VisiCalc. I don't think they've really changed that much in that time. And here is a specific spreadsheet of all the AI papers on the archive for the past 30 years. There's about 167,000 of them. And you can see the data right here. But let me show you the ChatGPT take on how to analyze a data set like this. So we can give ChatGPT access to yet another tool, this one a Python interpreter, so it's able to run code, just like a data scientist would. And so you can just literally upload a file and ask questions about it. And very helpfully, it knows the name of the file, and it's like, oh, this is CSV, a comma separated value file. I'll parse it for you. The only information here is the name of the file, the column names like you saw, and then the actual data. And from that, it's able to infer what these columns actually mean. Like that semantic information wasn't in there. It has to sort of put together its world knowledge of knowing that, oh yeah, arXiv is the site that people submit papers, and therefore that's what these things are, and that these are integer values, and so therefore it's a number of authors in the paper. Like all of that, that's work for a human to do, and the AI is happy to help with it. Now, I don't even know what I want to ask. So fortunately, you can ask the machine, can you make some exploratory graphs? And once again, this is a super high-level instruction with lots of intent behind it, but I don't even know what I want, and the AI kind of has to infer what I might be interested in. And so it comes up with some good ideas, I think. So a histogram of the number of authors per paper, time series of papers per year, word cloud of the paper titles. All of that, I think, will be pretty interesting to see. And the great thing is, it can actually do it. Here we go, nice bell curve. You see that 3 is kind of the most common. It's going to then it's going to make this nice plot of the papers per year. Something crazy is happening in 2023, though. Looks like we were on an exponential and it dropped off a cliff. What could be going on there? And by the way, all this is Python code you can inspect. And then we'll see the word cloud. And so you can see all these wonderful things that appear in these titles. But I'm pretty unhappy about this 2023 thing. It makes this year look really bad. Of course, the problem is that the year's not over. So I'm going to push back on the machine. So April 13th was the cutoff date, I believe. Can you use that to make a fair projection? So we'll see. This is a kind of ambitious one. So, again, I feel like there was more I wanted out of the machine here. I really wanted it to notice this thing. Maybe it's a little bit of an overreach for it to have sort of inferred magically that this is what I wanted. But I inject my intent. I provide this additional piece of sort of guidance. And under the hood, the AI is just writing code again. So if you want to inspect what it's doing, it's very possible. And now it does the correct projection. And if you notice, it even updates the title. I didn't ask for that, but it knows what I want. Now, we'll cut back to the slide again. This slide shows a parable of how I think a vision of how we may end up using this technology in the future. A person brought his very sick dog to the vet, and the veterinarian made a bad call to say, let's just wait and see. And the dog would not be here today had he listened. In the meanwhile, he provided the blood test, like the full medical records, to GPT-4, which said, I am not a vet, you need to talk to a professional. Here are some hypotheses. He brought that information to a second vet who used it to save the dog's life. Now, these systems, they're not perfect. You cannot overly rely on them. But this story, I think, shows that the human with a medical professional and with ChatGPT as a brainstorming partner was able to achieve an outcome that would not have happened otherwise. I think this is something we should all reflect on and think about as we consider how to integrate these systems into our world. And one thing I believe really deeply is that getting AI right is going to require participation from everyone. And that's for deciding how we want it to slot in. That's for setting the rules of the road for what an AI will and won't do. And if there's one thing to take away from this talk, it's that this technology just looks different. It's just different from anything people had anticipated. And so we all have to become literate. And that's honestly one of the reasons we released ChatGPT. Together, I believe that we can achieve the OpenAI mission of ensuring that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Thank you.
네, 여러분 어떻게 잘 보셨어요? 그렉 브록만은 좀 흥미로운 분이세요, 사실은. 이 그렉 브록만과 관련된 좀 재밌는 이야기를 좀 몇 가지 좀 들려드리면요. 이게 저 웨딩 포토거든요. 그 결혼 사진인데, 신부가 되신 분이 한국인이세요. 안나 브록만이라고 이제 성을 이제 남편 성을 따라서 했는데 그 한국 분이시고요. 그래서 또 예전에 그 학생 시절에 그 한국에서 열린 화학 올림피아드에 와서 실버 메달을 받았다라고 하더라고요. 그래서 한국도 자주 방문하고 또 아내가 또 한국 분인 만큼 한국에 또 애정이 깊고요. 또 같은 공동 설립자였던 그 샘 알트만이라는 사람이 있는데 여기 아래 그림에 보이죠? 이제 한국에 최근에 또 2024년, 2025년에 또 방문해가지고 또 한국하고 같이 AI 반도체 파트너십을 이제 체결하는 이제 그런 사진이고요. 또 이렇게 이제 한국이 정말 이제 AI나 반도체에 있어서 특히 이제 그 세계 중심이 되는 허브 국가가 되는 이제 그런 그림이 나와 있는데요. 그래서 UN AI 허브가 한국에 유치된다고 합니다. 이것은 이제 뭐 글로벌 AI의 이제 규정을 우리 한국이 만들 수 있고요. 또, 또, 이 세계에, 에서 이제 AI를 선도하는 기술을 우리가 공유한다든지 협력을 하는 것, 또 국내 AI 산업이 어떤 그렇게 성장하는 데 있어서 굉장히 이제 필수적인, 그래서 미래를 선도하는 디지털 AI 강국이 되지 않을까, 이런 생각을 합니다. 인공지능과 이제 법적 이슈에 대해서 좀 살펴볼 것인데요. 뭐 기술적인 부분에서 이제 우리가 어떻게 해야 될 거냐. 그래서 필요한 것들은 이제 우리가 좀 진행을 해줘야 되고, 그죠? 장려를 해줘야 되겠죠? 그리고 또, 하지만 또 위험하고 또 어두운 측면에 있어서는 우리가 규제도 필요할 것 같아요. 그죠? 그런 면에서 보면 이제 뭐, 근데 AI를 상용화할 때 어떤 법적인 쟁점이라든지 또는 뭐, 그 안전 규제 문제, 또 책임 기속 문제, 또 AI 창작물과 관련된 어떤 저작권의 문제, 또 프라이버시 침해 문제 이런 것들이 있을 수 있고요. 또 앞으로 이제 또 지속적인 과제로서 어떤 게 있냐면 AI 윤리 이런 것과 관련해서 이제 우리가 대응을 해줘야 된다. 또 AI에 대해서 인공지능에 대해서 이제 법인격을 부여해 줄 수 있고 왜냐하면 얘네들이 이제 자율주행이라든지 또 자기가 스스로 뭔가 행동을 하잖아요. 그렇기 때문에 거의 인간 같아요. 그래서 적어도 이제 물건은 아니고 인간과 비슷한 어떤 법인격을 부여해야 되지 않냐 이런 문제들이 있고요. 또 알고리즘에 기반해서 하는데 알고리즘이 어떤 편향성 이런 것도 있을 수 있고요. 또 알고리즘을 이렇게 심어 넣는 그 회사들끼리 인공지능 회사들 있죠. 어떤 담합을 한다든지 그랬을 때 이제 경쟁법적인 문제들 또 세금과 관련된 뭐 로봇세와 관련된 그런 문제들이 있어서 이익 재분배 문제를 어떻게 할 거냐라는 것도 법적 이슈 중에 하나입니다. 뭐 예를 들면 이제 여러분들이 이제 완전 자율 주행 차량을 한번 생각을 해봐요. 근데 현재는 이제 우리가 그 레벨을 나눠서 해요. 그래서 레벨 0부터 레벨 5까지 있는데 레벨 0은 이제 자동화가 전혀 안 된 자율주행이 거의 없는 옛날 차예요. 그런데 조금씩 이제 운전자를 보조하면 레벨 1, 또 부분 자동화 같은 경우 여러분들이 이제 가끔 그 안전거리를 뭐 스스로 이렇게 그 설정만 해놓으면 이렇게 딱 맞추는 이제 그런 기능까지 되면 부분 자동화 레벨 2. 그리고 정해진 조건에서 이제 자율주행이 가능한 그런 단계. 그래서 운전대를 넣고도 막 조금 가는 단계. 일단 레벨 3. 그리고 이제 정해진 도로에서 어떤 일정한 상황에서는 완전히 이제 자율주행이 가능한 단계. 이런 것들이 이제 고도 자동화 레벨 4. 그리고 모든 상황에서 이제 운전자가 이제 뒷좌석에 가서 누워도 돼, 자도 돼. 이런 거 레벨 5 이런 단계인데요. 뭐 이렇게 했을 때 이제 자율주행 차와 관련한 어떤 그런 법적인 문제도 우리가 생각을 해볼 수 있지 않을까. 자, 우리 이제 미래 초연결 사이에서 의사결정의 중요성. 우리 이제 지난 시간에 이제 초연결 사이를 봤는데 지금 이번 강에서는 이제 인공지능에 대해서 배웠어요. 그럼 이제 양자를 결합해 보면 이 인공지능이 의사결정을 해준다는 거예요. 그죠? 근데 그게 이제 기계가 해준다는 거예요. 지능형 기계가. 그랬을 때 우리가 어떻게 해야 될 거냐라는 것이죠. 자, 제4차 산업혁명에서 보면 이제 데이터의 발생 수집 단계부터 뭐 사물 인터넷, 그죠? 인터넷 오브 띵스, 뭐 또 인터넷, 어, 이런 어, 데이터 발생 수집이라든지 또는 이제 빅데이터에서 이제 그 데이터를 이제 저장하고 분석하고 그리고 또 AI를 통해서 가치를 창출하고 또 그리고 최적화 기술을 융합한 어떤 노블과 같은 그런 단계별로 이제 점점 발전해 올 텐데요. 그럴 때 이제 공유 경제나 이, 이제 바이오 기술하고 이제 인터넷 오브 이제 그 IOB라는 것이 이제 바이오 기술이거든요. 이런 거 이제 결합하면 이제 어떻게 이제 될 거냐라는 건데, 유토피아가 될 수도 있고 디스토피아가 될 수도 있다는 거예요. 즉 말하자면 권력과 부가 양극화가 되면 이제 디스토피아가 될 거라는 거죠. 왜 그게 이제 될 거냐라고 생각을 해보면, 어, 이 인공지능을 통해서 우리가 예측 가능한 것도 있겠지만 예측하지 못하는 것도 있을 거다. 왜냐하면 인공지능이 다 해줄 수 있는 건 아니에요. 계속 이야기하지만 그죠? 보조적인 수단이라는 거는. 왜냐하면 현실 자체가 우리는 복잡계이기 때문에. 그러면 이제 어떻게 의사결정을 하는 것이 좋으냐와 관련해 가지고 제가 영상을 하나 가져왔어요. 이 집단적 창의성을 어떻게 관리할 것인가. 이걸 한번 같이 보도록 하겠습니다.
I have a confession to make. I'm a business professor whose ambition has been to help people learn to lead. But recently I've discovered that what many of us think of as great leadership does not work when it comes to leading innovation. I'm an ethnographer. I use the methods of anthropology to understand the questions in which I'm interested. So along with 3 co-conspirators, I spent nearly a decade observing up close and personal exceptional leaders of innovation. We studied 16 men and women located in 7 countries across the globe, working in 12 different industries. In total, we spent hundreds of hours on the ground, on site, watching these leaders in action. We ended up with pages and pages and pages of field notes that we analyzed to look for patterns in what our leaders did. The bottom line, if we want to build organizations that can innovate time and again, we must unlearn our conventional notions of leadership. Leading innovation is not about creating a vision and inspiring others to execute it. Well, what do we mean by innovation? An innovation is anything that is both new and useful. It can be a product or service. It can be a process or a way of organizing. It can be incremental or it can be breakthrough. We have a pretty inclusive definition. How many of you recognize this man? Put your hands up. Keep your hands up if you know who this is. How about these familiar faces? So from your show of hands, it looks like many of you have seen a Pixar movie, but very few of you recognized Ed Catmull, the founder and CEO of Pixar, one of the companies I had the privilege of studying. My first visit to Pixar was in 2005 when they were working on Ratatouille, that provocative movie about a rat becoming a master chef. Computer-generated movies are really mainstream today, but it took Ed and his colleagues nearly 20 years to create the first full-length CG movie. In the 20 years hence, they've produced 14 movies, and I was recently at Pixar, and I'm here to tell you that number 15 is sure to be a winner. When many of us think about innovation, though, we think about an Einstein having an aha moment. But we all know that's a myth. Innovation is not about solo genius. It's about collective genius. Let's think for a minute about what it takes to make a Pixar movie. No solo genius, no flash of inspiration produces one of those movies. On the contrary, it takes about 250 people, 4 to 5 years, to make one of those movies. To help us understand the process, an individual in the studio drew a version of this picture. He did so reluctantly because it suggested that their process was a neat series of steps done by discrete groups. Even with all those arrows, he thought it failed to really tell you just how iterative, interrelated, and frankly messy their process was. Throughout the making of a movie at Pixar, the story evolves. So think about it. Some shots go through quickly. They don't all go through in order. It depends on how vexing the challenges are that they come up with when they're working on a particular scene. So if you think about that scene in Up, where the boy hands the piece of chocolate to the bird, that 10 seconds took one animator almost 6 months to perfect. The other thing about a Pixar movie is that no part of the movie is considered finished until the entire movie wraps. So partway through one production, an animator drew a character with an arched eyebrow that suggested a mischievous side. When the director saw that drawing, he thought it was great, it was beautiful, but he said, you got to lose it. It doesn't fit the character. 2 weeks later, the director came back and said, let's put in those few seconds of film. Because that animator was allowed to share what we refer to as his slice of genius, he was able to help that director reconceive the character in a subtle but important way that really improved the story. So what we know is, at the heart of innovation is a paradox. You have to unleash the talents and passions of many people, and you have to harness them into a work that is actually useful. Innovation is a journey. It's a type of collaborative problem solving, usually among people who have different expertise and different points of view. Innovations rarely get created full-blown. As many of you know, they're the result usually of trial and error. Lots of false starts, missteps, and mistakes. Innovative work can be very exhilarating, but it also can be really downright scary. So when we look at why it is that Pixar is actually able to do what it does, we have to ask ourselves, what's going on here? For sure, history, and certainly Hollywood, is full of star-studded teams that have failed. Most of those failures are attributed to too many stars or too many cooks, if you will, in the kitchen. So why is it that Pixar, with all of its cooks, is able to be so successful time and time again? When we studied an Islamic bank in Dubai, or a luxury brand in Korea, or a social enterprise in Africa, we found that innovative organizations are communities that have 3 capabilities: creative abrasion, creative agility, and creative resolution. Creative abrasion is about being able to create a marketplace of ideas through debate and discourse. In innovative organizations, they amplify differences, they don't minimize them. Creative abrasion is not about brainstorming, where people sort of suspend their judgment. No, they know how to have very heated but constructive arguments to create a portfolio of alternatives. Individuals in innovative organizations learn how to inquire, they learn how to actively listen. But guess what? They also learn how to advocate for their point of view. They understand that innovation rarely happens unless you have both diversity and conflict. Creative agility is about being able to test and refine that portfolio of ideas through quick pursuit, reflection, and adjustment. It's about discovery-driven learning, where you act as opposed to plan your way to the future. It's about design thinking, where you have that interesting combination of the scientific method and the artistic process. It's about running a series of experiments, not a series of pilots. Experiments are usually about learning. When you get a negative outcome, you're still really learning something that you need to know. Pilots are often about being right. When they don't work, someone or something is to blame. The final capability is creative resolution. This is about doing decision-making in a way that you can actually combine even opposable ideas to reconfigure them in new combinations to really produce a solution that is new and useful. So when you look at innovative organizations, they never go along to get along. They don't compromise. They don't let one group or one individual dominate, even if it's the boss, even if it's the expert. Instead, they have developed a rather patient and more inclusive decision-making process that allows for both-and solutions to arise and not simply either-or solutions. So these three capabilities are why we see that Pixar is able to actually do what it does. Let me give you another example, and that example is the infrastructure group of Google. The infrastructure group of Google is the group that has to keep the website up and running 24/7. So when Google was about to introduce Gmail and YouTube, they knew that their data storage system was inadequate. The head of the engineering group and the infrastructure group at that time was a man named Bill Colrin. Bill and his leadership team, who we referred to as his brain trust, had to figure out what to do about this situation. So they thought about it for a while. And instead of creating a group to really tackle this task, they decided to allow groups to emerge spontaneously around different alternatives. Two groups coalesced. One became known as Bigtable. The other became known as Builder from Scratch. Bigtable proposed that they build on the current system. Build It from Scratch proposed that it was time for a whole new system. Separately, these two teams were allowed to work full-time on their particular approach. In engineering reviews, Bill described his role as injecting honesty into the process by driving debate. Early on, the teams were encouraged to build prototypes so that they could, quote, bump them up against reality and discover for themselves the strengths and weaknesses of their particular approach. When Build It from Scratch shared their prototype with the group whose beepers would have to go off in the middle of the night if something went wrong with the website, they heard loud and clear about the limitations of their particular design. As the need for a solution became more urgent, and as the data or the evidence began to come in, it became pretty clear that the Bigtable solution was the right one for the moment. So they selected that one. But to make sure that they did not lose the learning of the Builder from Scratch team, Bill asked two members of that team to join a new team that was emerging to work on the next generation system. Now, this whole process took nearly 2 years, but I was told that they were all working at breakneck speed. Now, early in that process, one of the engineers had gone to Bill and said, "We're all too busy for this inefficient system of running parallel experiments." But as the process unfolded, he began to understand the wisdom of allowing talented people to really play out their passions. And he admitted, if you had forced us to all be on one team, we might have focused on proving who was right and winning, and not on learning and discovering, really what was the best answer for Google. So why is it that Pixar and Google are able to innovate time and again? It's because they've mastered the capabilities required for that. They know how to do collaborative problem solving, they know how to do discovery-driven learning, and they know how to do integrative decision-making. Now, some of you may be sitting there and saying to yourselves right now, we don't know how to do those things in my organization. So why do they know how to do those things at Pixar, and why do they know how to do those things at Google? Well, many of the people that worked for Bill told us, in their opinion, Bill was one of the finest leaders in Silicon Valley. And we completely agreed. The man is a genius. Leadership is the secret sauce, but it's a different kind of leadership, not the kind many of us think about when we think about great leadership. One of the leaders I met with early on said to me, "Linda, I don't read books on leadership. All they do is make me feel bad. In the first chapter, they say I'm supposed to create a vision. But if I'm trying to do something that's truly new, I have no answers. I don't know what direction we're going in, and I'm not even sure I know how to figure out how to get there." For sure, there are times when visionary leadership is exactly what is needed. But if we want to build organizations that can innovate time and again, we must recast our understanding of what leadership is about. Leading innovation is about creating the space where people are willing and able to do the hard work of innovative problem solving. So, At this point, some of you may be wondering, well, what does that leadership really look like? Well, at Pixar, they understand that innovation takes a village. So the leaders focus on building a sense of community and building those three capabilities. How do they define leadership? They say leadership is about creating a world to which people want to belong. What kind of world do people want to belong in at Pixar? A world where you're living at the frontier. So what do they focus their time on? Not on creating a vision. Instead, they spend their time thinking about how do we design a studio that has the sensibility of a public square so that people will interact. Let's put in a policy that anyone, no matter what their level or role, is allowed to give notes to the director about how they feel about a particular film. You know what? What can we do to make sure that all the disruptors, all the minority voices in this organization speak up and are heard? And finally, let's bestow credit in a very generous way. So I don't know if you've ever looked at the credits of a Pixar movie, but the babies born during a production are listed there. And how did Bill think about what his role was? Bill said, I lead a volunteer organization. Talented people don't want to follow me anywhere. They want to co-create with me the future. My job is to nurture the bottom up and not let it degenerate into chaos. How did he see his role? I'm a role model. I'm a human glue. I'm a connector. I'm an aggregator of viewpoints. I'm never a dictator of viewpoints. Advice about how you exercise the role? You know what? Hire people who argue with you. And guess what? Sometimes it's best to be deliberately fuzzy and vague. So some of you may be wondering now, what are these people thinking? They're thinking, you know what? I'm not the visionary. I'm the social architect. I'm creating the space where people are willing and able to share and combine their talents and passions. So if some of you are worrying now that you don't work at a Pixar or you don't work at a Google, I want to tell you there's still hope. We studied many organizations that were really not organizations you think of as ones where a lot of innovation happens. We studied a general counsel in a pharmaceutical company who had to figure out how to get the outside lawyers, 19 competitors, to collaborate and innovate. We studied the head of marketing at a German automaker where fundamentally they believed that it was the design engineers, not the marketeers, who were allowed to be innovative. We also studied Vineet Nair at HCL Technologies, an Indian outsourcing company. When we met Vineet, his company was about, in his words, to become irrelevant. We watched as he turned that company and really into a global dynamo of IT innovation. At HCL Technologies, like at many companies, the leaders had learned to see their role as setting direction and making sure that no one deviated from it. What he did is tell them it was time for them to think about rethinking what they were supposed to do. Because what was happening is that everybody was looking up, and you weren't seeing the kind of bottom-up innovation we saw at Pixar or Google. So they began to work on that. They stopped giving answers. They stopped trying to provide solutions. Instead, what they did is they began to see the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the young sparks, the people who were closest to the customers, as the source of innovation. They began to transfer the organization's growth to that level. In Vineet's language, this was about inverting the pyramid so that you could unleash the power of the many by loosening the stranglehold of the few and increase the quality and the speed of innovation that was happening every day. For sure, Vineet and all the other leaders that we studied were in fact visionaries. For sure, they understood that that was not their role. So I don't think it is accidental that many of you did not recognize Ed. Because Ed, like Vineet, understands that our role as leaders is to set the stage, not perform on it. So if we want to invent a better future, and I suspect that's why many of us are here, then we need to reimagine our task. Our task is to create the space where everybody's slices of genius can be unleashed and harnessed and turned into works of collective genius. Thank you.
네, 여러분 여러분 잘 보셨어요? 네, 집단적 창의성이라고 하는 것, 이분이 이제 경영학자이자 기술 민속학자로서 구글이나 픽사의 집단지성, 컬렉티브 지니어스를 좀 강조한 그런 영상이라고 보면 되겠습니다. 자, 지금까지 우리가 인공지능 기술이 어떤 건지 이해하고 또 법적인 쟁점, 그리고 인공지능이 초연결 사회에서 어떻게 의사결정을 하는지 뭐 집단적 창의성, 집단지성이 중요하다라는 것을 이제 배웠습니다. 여기까지 했습니다. 여러분 고생 많으셨습니다.